believe that Antwerp Six exhibition is one of the most important events in history, in fashion history, but not only in fashion, but also art, architecture, or any creative disciplines. Polina Stepanova is our mentor. She's an artist, and she's a graduate from Fashion Academy. She talks about Walter van Beirendonck, who was her mentor and teacher back in times. Polina is a curator of our Wild About Fashion trip in Antwerp, and she's, let's say, disclose the inner Antwerp contacts for us.
Very weird to talk right now because I can hear Walter's voice on the background, and I would always listen to Walter's voice as my teacher or in general, so it feels actually like he's being present. Many Walters. I feel like it's a Walter verse, or like it's a double U of his name is like double U, double, or maybe triple, or maybe multiple. What I find beautiful about Walter's work is that if everybody in the 80s, when they started, all of the Antwerp Six redefined the boundaries of what it means to be belonging to a particular gender or having an identity, I feel like Walter realized that it's really possible to have multiple identities simultaneously, and it feels like all of his works are a resemblance of that multi-character universe that are kind of his alter egos. And we also hear it was this multi-layered soundtrack here in the background, and you have an emotional, poetic character, we have an infantile character, we have a child archetype who is just born to this world and is really curious, and this child archetype is really close to an alien because he's also new to the world and also new to his body, new to his gender, new to his, oh my god, I have to wear a classic suit structure, why this classic suit is actually worn on me, can I have a flower on it? And somebody who feels like he sees nature for the first time, but also he's been there for so much time. And then we also have a robot, so a synthetic body, the body that is being cultivated, the second build, artificial nature. What is the difference between an artifice and something that we create? Is that artificial or that's natural? So Walter is not a dichotomy. A lot of the Antwerp Six and a lot of the designers are easily described through dichotomy. Walter is really a we. It's really a double universe, double, triple, multiple universe. That's my reading. If you think of Anne, you can think of two worlds. And Demeulemeester is like Persephone, when you have her as somebody who lives in the underworld and then comes out to the light, comes out to the human realm. So there's this transition, transgression, and what she started with is the rethinking of femininity through that very particular role where the idea of fragility is not about fragility of the body, but the fragility of kind of a human essence of what is, how fragile is the barrier between being instinctive and animalistic, but also conscious. How fragile is the limit between being harsh and powerful and aggressive, and also at the same time being so sensual. And she can be a pirate, she can be a fallen goddess, she can be a ghost, she can be a rock singer. It is somebody who is not in a city, who is not in a real, physical, recognizable place, yet you know that you've met her, you know that you spoke to her. You just have to remember who she was. Probably you only feel a shadow. What is fake tailoring? If I tell you that was one of the collection titles of Dirk Van Saene, we can think about it as a very cool way of describing how actually Dirk Van Saene's mind was working. On the background, you see all of the collections that Dirk created, seated in the front row and in the back row, watching this mechanical catwalk. fake tailoring here refers not to faking something or making something up, but rather an imaginary scenario where everything has its origin, but for a moment it can be forgotten and repurposed. It was a jacket, but it can eventually become a much more freeing top. It was a skirt, but woof, probably it was a tablecloth in the past. So what is the past of an object? What is the present? What is the future? It only depends on the character who is there. It is a very anthropological study of who is that person, and you can only understand it as a viewer. Dirk works as an artist that is inviting a viewer to participate in this conversation and to see how the personality that he's observing is going to respond, or how her personality is going to alter when she is going to wear the outfit. It is all about a game. So let's make it up or fake it. For somebody, it can be weird, but Dries is somebody who created the idea of juxtaposition, not a clash of collage details or a Dada-esque version of juxtaposition, but no, in styling. Dries was always working, and also the brand now carries that heritage of the idea of not accidental styling, but styling is almost like an evidence of what happened to this person. There's always a cultural baggage, there's always a reference, there's always a place, and you always start with a why. Who is she? How the hell you would wear this flannel shirt? Is it her boyfriend's shirt? Did she borrow it from a random guy on in a pub? What happened? Why is she wearing this top, which is warming her up? Or probably this is a sentimental layer because you see a little bit of quilting and you see a little bit of flowers. And then, of course, we have this fantastic layering with the skirt. This is also very typical if you see that outfit. That's a juxtaposition of materials that you would not naturally go for. Dries very often started working with materials. As association, he would look for fabrics that would speak to him. Even from his childhood years, he would remember to travel with his parents, to choose the fabrics, choose the materials. We know that Dries from the very early childhood would always feel the materials and look into them and associate them with not only a purpose of a garment, but rather a story, a travel, an experience. So he's placing these experiences in a very contemporary, very extraordinary way. And it's always like an enigma. When you look into her and you're saying, is that a conversation with Spain? Is that a conversation with Cristobal? Or is it a conversation with history? Is it a conversation about contemporary history? And why is she wearing an elegant version of a boxer? Then the other element that is super interesting about Dries is that he had a very dynamic relationship with cultures. It would not only be looking into the ethnical costume. He never liked the word ethnical. He would rather prefer the word folklore, finding it more respectful. He would like to tell the stories about people and how craft is an evidence of their work and their thought and their culture, up to very particular culture sensibilities, noticing that if you're traveling somewhere, you're not going to create a costume. I'm going to go there and show one really interesting detail on the wall now. This is a very interesting detail because he's pairing a very comfortable, very pragmatic shoe together with a very elegant and very complex piece of fabric. I find it really interesting and very Dries because he's all about smartness. He's never about an overcomplicated facade. Don't be tricked about the embroideries. Embroideries and heavy situations are always paired with something that is realistic, down to earth. How would this woman actually style it? She doesn't want to be in the center of the scene. She wants to be comfortable because for her, be she a Luisa Casati in her mind or be she a princess of the place that she's coming from, she would know that she feels comfortable in all of that very excessive attire. And this is why she'd probably pair it with a sneaker. She doesn't have to have a heel to scream that she is present. Marina Yee was the one who started painting with white on top of images. She was a brilliant illustrator. Her hand was extremely skilled, and she would have a very expressive character, a very expressive line. It was always a woman of atmosphere. And also, as her collaged works, she would always look into very collage styling, matching the materials that would probably not make sense together. Be it a piece of a nicely tailored jacket that would be deconstructed or ripped, almost once again as an evidence of some kind of story, something that happened. Her work is an expression of time, a time that is experienced. Something that happened to a person is reflected in the garment.
We highly recommend you to come to Antwerp and see everything with your own eyes, because this is the way how Six designers pushed the boundaries. Push your boundaries and stay wild about.